But let's go now to our money lead, because oil prices dropped today after President Trump told reporters he thinks Iran would like to talk. And the Wall Street Journal reported the Iranians are sending signals they want to de-escalate the conflict with Israel. Crude prices jumped dramatically last week when the fighting started. Let's bring in CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich. And Vanessa, when could consumers here in the U.S. start to feel the impacts of what we're seeing in the Middle East right now?
Well, Phil, anytime there are geopolitical tensions, especially in the Middle East, we watch oil prices very carefully because that translates to gas prices, and that's where U.S. consumers will start to feel this conflict first. But as you mentioned, look at oil prices. So the crude oil, that is the global benchmark, falling by 2% today, and sort of the U.S. indicator, Brent crude, falling by over 1.5%. This is a dramatic turnaround, obviously, from last week, where we saw oil prices plummeting at 13% at one point. But here's where it gets tricky for consumers. Look at gas prices. Gas prices have been relatively low, holding steady over the past month or so. Today, $3.11 nationwide, $3.12 a month ago. A year ago, coming down substantially from $3.60. However, just a little bit of turmoil in the oil market can send prices higher. Patrick DeHaan, who is with Gas Buddy, he predicts that just in the next few days, we're going to start to see a 10 to 20 cent rise in gas prices. And if things continue to escalate, those prices will increase even more. And why is this important, Phil? Because Iran is part of OPEC. It's part of 12 members that make up this group of the largest oil producing nations in the world. So you have Iran, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. And what we look at here is what could happen, number one, with Iran's production capabilities if their oil fields are hit. Also, Iran could choose to hold back some of its oil as a tactic in this tension, in this escalation with Israel. Two things to keep our eye on as the days progress, Phil.
Yeah, critical. OPEC Plus has already been confusing enough over the course of the last couple of months with their production schedules. What are the long-term impacts if the conflict doesn't end soon? Yeah, and there is one tiny piece of land or ocean, let's say, that we are watching very closely. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a 21-mile slice of ocean that is absolutely critical for oil capabilities, for oil to move throughout this region. And the concern is, among many analysts, is that Iran could choose to cut it off. And that would be incredibly problematic because 21 million barrels of oil move through that strait every single day. So that is what analysts are watching as sort of a worst case scenario. But Phil, look at U.S. markets today. Green, green, green. What a dramatic turnaround from last week when we saw the Dow down more than 750 points. Today, up 300 points. This is an indication that investors are maybe a little bit hopeful that with cooling oil prices and Iran indicating that they want to, in some ways, cool off this conflict, that we see markets moving in a different direction. But Phil, as you know, numbers change, things change very quickly. Tomorrow's a new day. We'll see what happens. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich. Very true. Thank you very much.
This video shows the Tehran headquarters on fire. That's just one of today's strikes as Israel and Iran entered a fourth day of back and forth attacks. Israel's Air Force said that this evening they struck 2 Iranian jets at an airport in Tehran that were intended to intercept Israeli aircraft. CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward is joining us now. She's at a hospital in Tel Aviv. This is the hospital where they send out ambulances when missiles go off. Clarissa, what have you been seeing throughout this fourth day?
Well, it's pretty extraordinary, actually, Casey, here at the Ichilov Hospital. When this war, or this phase of the war, began just a few days ago, within 7 hours, this hospital moved all of its patients, 600 of them, from rooms in various wards down into a parking lot that had been full of cars and motorcycles. That parking lot is now a fully functional, underground, missile-proof hospital. And they have an entire protocol around receiving patients when there are these ballistic missile attacks, and these are different to the types of attacks that these doctors and nurses are experienced at dealing with. They're not suicide bombings, they're not rockets, they are hugely powerful weapons. They're seeing a lot of crush injuries, buildings pancaked, and essentially they stand in one area, sort of behind a wall that is providing some protection, and then begin to take in patients so that they can be treated as they pour in from some of the sites. And we are seeing now, Casey, every single night, multiple sites being hit, multiple civilian residential areas being hit, residential buildings being hit. Last night, 8 people killed. The death total here in Israel up to 24 now. Of course, in Iran, it's in the hundreds. And so the expectation is that as the night goes on, we will likely see more missile barrages. Iran's news agency, or one of its news agencies, I should say, has warned already that another operation of missiles and drones is underway, although I will say that we haven't received any of the typical alerts that we usually do here to indicate that those missiles are underway. And it's significant, the Israeli army today announced, or the Air Force, I should say, announced that they believe they've taken out roughly 30% of Iran's missile launch pads. So the expectation, as with every evening in the last 3 or 4, is that it will be a busy evening, and the doctors and nurses here at this hospital will be ready to deal with whatever comes their way, Casey.
All right, Clarissa Ward for us in Tel Aviv. Clarissa, thanks very much for that. Our panel's still here. We're joined by CNN political director and our Washington bureau chief, David Chalian. David, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So this, of course, entering its 4th day, and we've learned over the weekend that Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't ruled out taking out Khamenei. There's been this question about whether Donald Trump is willing to support him in that or not. It sounds like not for now. But one of the dynamics here, as we look to see what the American president is going to do, has been that his MAGA base is pretty divided about what to do about this. I want to play kind of a series of sound bites from some of President Trump's allies that kind of show you why this is not a clean situation for President Trump. Watch.
Look, I think it is very much in the interest of America to see regime change.
I could tell you right now, our MAGA base does not want a war at all whatsoever.
If diplomacy is not successful, and we left with the option of force, I would urge President Trump to go all in.
They asked me for a quote, and I said, hey, the Israelis are Israeli first, as they should be. We need to always be America first.
I mean, MAGA versus the neocons. I mean, who's going to win out here?
And this is why, to your point, I think that we're not seeing sort of a clear direction yet from President Trump. I think he still is looking at a lot of options here of how much involvement, whether or not the Americans will join in some of the bunker busting missions that clearly the Israelis are looking for help on. But what I find so fascinating is that we are reminded, like we were in 2016, when Trump and Bernie Sanders were both running in different parties, that there's some weird alignment, right? I mean, you have Tucker Carlson out there clearly saying that Donald Trump is complicit in this war of Israel with Iran right now, while Donald Trump's aides are trying to portray him all of this administration as the peacemaker here. And you have the likes of Bernie Sanders out there shouting today, saying, do not allow America to get drawn into another war. And you see these weird alliances that leaves Donald Trump's politics on this a little scrambled.
Look, what's interesting here is that those that are pushing him to get involved with Iran were people that were never with him in 16. Those that don't want him to get involved are sort of the original folks, for what it's worth, I think, because, Trump's instinct in 15, and whether he did it because he just wanted to attack the Bushes or he did it because he really believed it, and I'm not going to swear on an oath I know either way, it doesn't matter. He's come across as a critic of the Iraq War, as a critic of, like, if you're going to go in and try to do regime change, you better have a plan B. And look, I do know this, like, one of the reasons why it was easy for him to fire Mike Waltz is Waltz, the first national security advisor, did talk him into the Houthis attack. It is deemed, it was not successful. They pretended it was successful. They stopped it.
Sure.
And they said, hey, we've succeeded. We don't have to do it anymore. I do think Trump is instinctively not wanting to own this, because I think he knows if he owns it, he owns it. And just like this is our third president in a row where they all kind of agree on this. Obama, Biden, and Trump do not want to get bogged down in Middle East politics. They'd rather be pivoting. The Middle East is not a national security priority to America the way it used to be, because of we don't even need the economic. I'm not saying it isn't viable, but there's all these presidents have been trying to pivot to Asia, and the Middle East sort of drags them back in. So I think, we'll see what he does, but I think you look at it, the initial base for him always was don't get involved in